on my own life. When I was like 11 years old, and I was running through the woods one day, and I just happened to be running. We were playing hide and seek, and it was my turn to find the kids. And I was running through the woods, and as I ran down the woods, I didn't see it, but there was a low barbed wire fence, and I ran into it smack, and it caught me right here at the thighs and grappled me and flung me out and brought me back, and I hung upside down by this barbed wire fence. And I remember screaming and yelling for my friends to come, and they didn't come because they were hiding from me, which really didn't help much. Finally, one of them did come and helped me up and got me off, and I really never saw the hand of God there that protected me. There was another time that I was born, and I wasn't born, but I was raised in Clemson, South Carolina. We used to go out to a railroad trestle on the Seneca River. It's about 40 feet high, and there was telephone wires. Joined this particular movement that was going on back then in the 50s. You had to go out there, and you had to wait till the train got to the beginning of the tracks, and then you either had to jump or get mashed. So two of us went out there, and I happened to be one of them, and you could not leave and you could not jump until after the train came. The train had come so many times before and it stopped before, but knew what was going to happen and decided from time and time again that he wasn't going to stop anymore because he knew kids would jump. So we were standing there, and lo and behold, the train was coming, and I was all excited, and it was just boy, I couldn't wait. Was I going to jump or was I going to get smacked? Because you couldn't make it off the trestle. It was about 30 feet high, 30, 40 feet. Well, at that moment that it came and it got to the end of the track, you had about 5 seconds, and he was going about 45 miles an hour, I guess, blowing his horn, blowing it. And I finally jumped. We both jumped at the same time. I really never thought about the hand of God that protected me in that moment in my life. Nor did I think about it one time when I went off into a little place, and we used to go up on the highlands in North Carolina, and we used to come down this embankment where there was a waterfalls, and you would slide down and you'd slide into what was called a washing hole. It was a place where you would go down in here and it would just literally throw you back up like a washing tumbling machine. Under there was a little cliff, and nobody knew where that cliff led to because, like I said, it was just a hole. I remember one time going in there and sort of catching myself before I was flung back up, holding myself under, and then going along the inside of the wall, thinking to myself, of course, being cool, that, all those kids would probably think I've drowned. Not knowing that if I would have probably went another 2 feet, I'd been sucked up and into somewhere else. But I never really noticed the hand of God that was over me, protecting me. Nor did I notice at the time that I got in a car drunk and was driving with a bunch of my friends. And as I was driving that car and hit a parked car going 50 miles an hour and literally got stuck in the windshield of the glass. And they had to beat the whole windshield out from me just to get me out of the car. And as I got out and walked around and nobody was hurt, and neither was I never thought about how God overruled and kept Pete Maravich here. And it's been that way in my life, hundreds upon hundreds of times, that I've literally reflected back at the times that I really shouldn't be here. But I am here, and I'm here for one purpose. And I grew up in Clemson, South Carolina, and when I was 4 years old, the only thing I ever knew was basketball. Much like Glenn Campbell sings, and he's one of the greatest singers of all time. There's just no doubt in my mind. I used to listen to him in college. I mean, like, it was unbelievable in college. All the songs he sang tonight back in those days. And by the time I was 5 years old, I was already playing organized basketball. My parents baited me into the game. They never forced me. And when I was 7 years old, my dad came to me and he says, Pete, he says, I don't have any money to send you to college. You're going to have to get a scholarship. And if you get a scholarship, they'll pay your way. I only make $2,900 a year, and that's just not going to pay your way by the time you get there. And if you're good enough, Pete, you might even make it to the pro basketball. That's where the greatest players play. And there's so few. There's so few, like 1 in 20,000 make it to the NBA that play the game. And if you get there, you might play on a team that wins a world championship. And you'll get a big diamond ring, Pete, so big, and it has on there world champions, and you'll be declared as the rest of the team one of the greatest at that particular time. Not only that, Pete, you'll be able to make money. They'll pay you for doing it. They'll pay you for playing something that you enjoy doing. Well, from that day, I decided to commit my life totally to basketball. I was dedicated, possessed, and obsessed by it. I was so dedicated to it, I'll tell you some of the things I used to do. We lived 2.5 miles outside of town in Clemson, South Carolina, and I used to get the basketball and I'd dribble in all the way. I would not accept a ride. I would dribble in with my right hand and dribble back home with my left hand, 5 miles a day, to the gym where I'd play 8 to 10 hours a day. When I finally got a bicycle when I was about 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, I learned to dribble the basketball on my bicycle all the way in. It made it a lot easier to get into town, too, and I got there quicker. And I dribbled the ball literally by riding the bicycle. It got so bizarre that my dad came to me one day and he says, Pete, come on, get your basketball and let's go in the car. I said, where are we going? He says, I'll tell you when we get there. He went over there and he went on this specific highway and there weren't many cars there, and he said, now look, I want you to get in the back seat, stick yourself out that back window there, and you start dribbling the ball. I'm going to drive at various speeds. I want to see if you can really control this thing. And so I did that, and he'd go 5, 10, 15 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour. And of course, if you realize when you're trying to dribble a basketball out of a car or on a bicycle, you got to throw it way out in front because he's going, and it's coming back. See? It really comes back quick, along with a lot of rocks. And to see the faces on the people that just happened to be driving by was something in itself. It really was. I used to take the basketball to bed with me. I slept with the basketball till I was about 13 years old. I would get in bed, and I'd lay in the bed for 1 hour before I ever went to sleep, and I would repeat 3 things. Fingertip control, backspin, follow through. Fingertip control, backspin, follow through as I released it, laying down. I was completely possessed by the game. I used to go around my house blindfolded, dribbling the ball, because I knew where everything was. Of course, to the dismay of my mother, sometimes I didn't, and I knew how to dribble the ball very fast out of the house. I used to get the basketball, and I would dribble out in thunderstorms. Not little rainy, not sun showers, but thunderstorms, lightning, everything else. You couldn't even see. I used to sneak out my back window. I'd go to this little spot where there was a mud hole. It was kind of a real hard mud, and I'd start dribbling the ball as the mud and everything splashed up on me, and literally scared to death because of the thunder and lightning, because I felt like if I could dribble in that mud and that water and everything else, control it, I could certainly do it on a court when someone was guarding me. See, I was so committed to the game of basketball. In fact, from the time I was 5 years old till I was 17 years old, I played over 20,000 hours of basketball. In the March Reader's Digest, they had a story in there about television and how it affects young people's minds, or any person. It wasn't for or against television, it just said how it affects one's mind. And it said that the average person, by the time he's 20 years old, sees 20,000 hours of television. And I kind of paralleled that with my life. 20,000 hours of people watching television. I spent 20,000 hours of hard sweat playing the game of basketball. When I was 12 years old, it was my first time I ever played in a regular game for junior varsity. I made the junior varsity when I was 12, and at 13, I started on my high school team and played 5 years of high school basketball. I was 4'9½", and when I was 12 years old, so some of you youngsters that think that you're not tall enough, you will be. And so at that time, at 12, a reporter came up to me after the game, and I used to shoot the basketball from down here because I was too weak to shoot it from up here. And so I used to take the ball and take it and release it like this. And this reporter saw me, and he says, well, it looks like this guy is drawing a pistol. And he wrote that up, and that name has stuck ever since. I just threw that in. I know that doesn't interest you at all, but I just wanted to say that. But he asked me after the game, he came up and interviewed me. That was my first interview I ever had, and I wish it had been my last. But he said, what are you going to do when you grow up, Pistol Pete? And I said, well, I'm going to play pro basketball. I'm going to be on a team that wins a world championship, get a diamond ring, and make $1 million. And he literally fell off his chair with laughter. And I said, what are you laughing about? He says, $1 million? They don't make that kind of money. This was in the 50s, and he was right. But I just felt like at some point in my life I would. My early church life was absolutely probably zero. I was not raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a church home. I was raised with telling Pete, you got to go to church. It's good to go to church. You need church. You need church, church, church.